Dr. Paul Leslie, thank you so much for joining us once again here on the Science of Psychotherapy podcast. How are you?
I'm well, I'm honored, and obviously you two are gluttons for punishment to have me back.
Yes, Paul, I am the other part of the two. It's so good to catch up with you again. Fantastic. Have we had you on before? Good Lord. Right. If we'd known that.
Well, usually, there's a lot of neuroscience, as I'm sure you two are well aware of, that after traumatic events happen, sometimes memory is impacted. Okay. So that might be why you don't remember.
but putting it, now being serious, because last time we had you on, we were talking about this the fabulous book that you had out, and all these ideas about how to try and do therapy a little bit differently. And you used this term, a magical session, creating a magical session. Mm-hmm. And we talked about the book, and we've got people out there reading that. But now what you've done is you've made a video course, so a training program. And so we wanted to make people aware of that and then remind them of some of the things and talk about some of the stuff they didn't get to manage to talk about last time. So just quickly, let's just plug the course, but just quickly, what have you done? So you've made it, is it a video program of the book? Is it an expansion? What's the sort of the deal that you've done with this?
Yeah, I wanted to set it up so that people who are interested in my work or just interested in the topic of making their sessions more alive and inspired, and the term we use, magical. So it's kind of like a way we could sit down and just have a chat, although I'm the one chatting, but just kind of a little one-on-one to where I take them through not just the information in the book, but also a lot of application and real-world case studies and things like that, so that they have the confidence to create these interactions with their clients that can be both effective, meaningful, and very, wonderfully magical. So I'm kind of excited about it.
Well, but it fits in so well with the whole theme, and certainly the stuff Matt and I talk about all the time is creativity and innovation and so on in a session. But we just had a conversation with Lou Cozzolino, who was talking about the importance of knowledge and the importance of information, the importance of studying, but that we get stuck. As therapists, we get stuck. We lose the sense of what therapy can be. And I think, and Matt, I'm talking for Matt, but we do. We've talked about it a lot. This idea of having an expansive, almost innovative, creative experience in therapy, rather than you're sitting there getting laboriously, helped by somebody else, is a very exciting process. And so that's what we're excited. I mean, Matt, we talked about this a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think last time, Paul, when we spoke, we did talk a lot about this, the magical session and sort of some of the dynamics that are involved in creating that really sort of dynamic session, which isn't so, I guess, programmatic or sort of rote. And so today, wondering if we could just step through, just some of the key points that you'd be bringing out in this new course of yours.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I think the thing that made the most impact to me in a lot of my research is how our field of therapy, we started a core theme. We introduced themes to our clients, and each school of therapy has their own thing. So if I have a problem, the solution would be maybe from a classical psychodynamic perspective, free association, dream analysis. But I go to another therapist who's a cognitive behavioral. We're talking about cognitive distortions and all this. And all these are themes that we, the therapist, take a part in creating, and we introduce clients into our world. The issue I have is that sometimes we forget that we're the ones creating the themes, and the client is an active part of the interaction. And oftentimes we think that if we just give our clients more and more and more information, that just the information alone is going to create change. Now, in some cases it does. It's like that moment in time, they have that epiphany that, oh my God, you said that at the right time, the right way. And people just need to hear something from someone who's not their friends and family for it to sink in. But when we're talking about something to create true generative change, we kind of think we need to move away with this idea that it's just information. Our job is to provide information, because I think it was Humberto Maturana, the Chilean biologist, who talked about the idea of closed systems and open systems in biology, and much more in depth than what we'll get today. But his idea, as he brought this over to kind of the psychotherapy realm, is that people are closed systems. And a lot of times you can try your darndest to get information in, but because it's a closed system, just giving them information straight away, they don't take it in. It's how we give the information, how we, if a person's a system in its own right, how we perturb the system, because we may need to stretch ourselves and be more dramatic with some people for them to take in the new information. We may need them to do some kind of physical activity with them. We may need them to experience something just totally just out of the ordinary. And if that's the case, for them to take in the information, we as therapists need to have that flexibility. And it's like you're saying, what Lou was saying about, having good information, but, too many people, as he was saying, was forgetting that, there's more than just information. And I think that information is obviously what we are giving people, but if we're not giving them a certain experience that's just for them, they can't take in that information. Yeah. And then it ends up being kind of a back and forth. Why aren't you taking this information? And then you become a parent. Well, I've told you this before. Why did you do this? I'm telling you, your thinking's irrational.
And the client's getting it wrong. Yeah. I mean, with Lou, we use the sort of analogy to jazz musician. And I know you're a musician as well. And Matt's a musician. A lot of therapists are, which is great. But this idea that a scale, the information, the technical knowledge that you learn as a musician, which as therapists we learn as therapeutic methods, which are terrific, but they actually just become the framework upon which you improvise and expand. And that idea, I mean, I know you come from the Ericksonian tradition, like me, and what Ernie talks about, creating a creative moment, and this emerges from the client. It's if we can make it the client's creative moment, and now we're going to publish an article from you as well in the next magazine, and you show how you actually create what you're saying, this quite fascinating, unusual experience, but you didn't think of the experience. I'm reading the case study, and the client actually brought it up or brought it into the framework. All you did was you grabbed it and ran with it like another musician, sort of doing a bit of a line. And that's what you talk about quite a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. You use the musician and jazz analogy, and I think that's a wonderful analogy. I've heard several leading theorists talk about how we need to start creating our work as if we have a key and scales, but at the same time, there has to be that spontaneity and improvisation. It's like I can remember years back sitting in my early days as a musician, and some guys were sitting in with this local group, and the guy says, okay, well, it's just basically 12-bar blues in A. And this poor kid who had never played blues in his life and was classically trained says, is A minor, major, is it a Mixolydian scale? And the guy who was playing, he'd played with like Otis Redding and people like that, couldn't read a note, had no idea, just heard it. And he looked at the guy as if he was from Mars. And that's a lot of times how our clients feel when we bring out the psychobabble, or we start trying to match interventions to them that don't feel natural to them, or it's outside their value system. I have a lot of engineers who live near me because we have a nuclear plant here, and so we have all these structural and nuclear engineers, and all these ladies and gentlemen are very intelligent, but they're very concrete thinkers. So if you don't at least in some way get them something that they can grasp hold of, something that, their mathematical mind can understand, you're going to lose them. But at the same time, if all you're doing is giving them logic and reason, well, with their problem, they're already thought of all those logical reasons. You have to do something totally different to kind of stretch their comfort zone. So whether they have to know what, key a song is in, and instead of someone said, just go for it, just go for it. Well, at the same time, if you don't have that skill set that allows you to go for it, that's a problem. But if all you got is a skill set and no ability or courage to go for it, then that's a problem. So it's that melding of two worlds. I just want to say this, and this is why I really love what the work you two are doing, is that oftentimes, at least in my career, we find that therapy, it's a battle, it's this dichotomous battle to where you've got all the evidence-based scientific neurobiology on this side, and then you got all the touchy-feely, artsy kind of on the other side. And I mean, obviously, some of the best therapists out there are clearly in both camps. I mean, you two very much see, yes, all this research and science is great, but also this other arts and, out of the ordinary. And I think a lot of folks are scared to get out of the camp they're in, to realize that it's a bit of like riding a wave, that knowledge base, that if you're really studying in depth your craft, then it takes the courage to go to the more artsy side to learn to let go and flow and see what happens. And so unfortunately, a lot of people just don't feel comfortable doing that back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's a tricky thing.
Sorry, Richard.
Yeah. No, you go, man.
Just keeping with the music analogy, I was trained classically in composition, but then I went on to do composition for film, and that borrows from every genre. You sort of grab whatever you can, and you have to have what we would say. You have to have your chops. You have to know what sort of technique, and if it's going to be a string orchestra with a certain sound or a jazz orchestra, but then it really comes down to an intuitive sense. And this is the same with psychotherapy, right? You have to have the technical knowledge, but the technical knowledge of itself is not enough. Actually, it's very much should just be in the background. It's so much more the intuitive sense, the capacity to be flexible, to anticipate anything, and then to be able to very quickly run with that, just like a jazz musician, as you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a really interesting thing that I saw Paul Simon, not Paul Leslie, but Paul Simon, the songwriter, and he was being interviewed, and it was back in the days when someone could just sit in an interview chair with a guitar and have a chat, rather than all these things where you have to say some amazing stuff. And he was just playing some stuff. He said, I'm working on something at the moment. And it was really interesting because he had all this technical stuff. He said, I was listening to some Bach and I did something, and then I did this, and that was nice. And it goes along, and then I go da 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 da, and then it goes here, and he says, now I played this bit because then it kind of flows into there, and I'm kind of stuck now. And the interviewer said, oh, you're sort of stuck. He said, yeah, I could go no 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 here, or I could go no 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 there, or I could go no no no. There's kind of three ways I could go, and it was exactly that. So in other words, he had technical thing, he had the voices and the music in his head, and he was waiting for the intuitive interaction with something, with his muse in this case, or with us, our muse is the client, or we are the client's muse. And the song he was talking about was Bridge Over Troubled Water. You go, wow, you were struggling with and of course for us it sounds perfect in the end. But it was that beautiful example. And I think you do that really nicely in the case study in the article, where we won't give it away too much, but you found a commonality between these two people, the father and son who are having struggle, and you just brought it out, and you actually physicalized it in the room. What are those sorts of experiences that you find? This how receptive are people to this sort of highlighting and amplifying their own ideas?
I think it just. This is a cop-out, but this is what all three of us will say. It really kind of depends on the client.
Right.
But I have found, though, that when it works, it's when I feel that it's a natural thing. And if I'm so much in my head, oh, now it's time to do this thing that I plan to do, even in the moment, if it feels very restricted, I don't allow myself to jump in. I feel like I have to feel comfortable with whatever I'm requesting. And that's been my battle, I think, is I see some therapists who I really respect, who get their direct their clients to do certain things, and they're helpful. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm also wondering in the back of my head, would those very therapists be willing to do that themselves? So I never ask my clients to do anything, any of these kind of strange things or rituals or whatever it is that I'm not willing to do myself. So if I'm feeling restricted, feeling I don't know if I would do that, then it's probably a good idea for me not to say it. But if I get the kind of the intuitive green light that say, you know what, I'm just going to go for it, I feel comfortable, I'd say 99% of the time, the clients, initially, they're going to look at you like you're a little strange. But that's what's wonderful about our field is, the media has so gotten clients to think that we're all nuts anyway. And we're just kind of going to be weirdos to begin with, that there actually gives us a little more free reign, freedom to do those kind of things that we need to do to kind of open up that closed system.
Right. And so talking about being weirdos, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on nonlinear thinking when it comes to therapy.
Well, to me, this is the whole thing I was saying about one side, is scientific and the other side's real artsy. To me, nonlinear thinking is a combination of both. Unfortunately, I think our field is so stuck in this idea of finding a magic bullet. This is the causal factor, and we've done, every theory has it, every technique has it. It's either cognitive distortions, unconscious conflicts, energy blockages in the body. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And those are all true in that moment if the client buys that. Because again, this is just another theme. Does the client take this theme in? But for me, nonlinear thinking is, if I'm going to think that the only way I can help somebody is to get down to almost the deterministic, smallest component of any problem, and to find out the root of that, I'm missing all the complexity of what's happening. I mean, if we go back to the 1950s and early 60s with the Mental Research Institute at Palo Alto, California. I mean, it's incredible, brain power of all these leading interdisciplinary figures who kind of eventually figured out that they didn't really need to know why something was happening to change what was happening. Because, you start with an event, but then how you think about or how you process the event turns into a certain, mind, body, emotional state, which then leads to another mind, body, emotional state, and then people are just so complex. So trying to get someone go all the way down to find what the problem is, sometimes it's not only a long, arduous process, but it could be unnecessary. So if a client is a system, then approaching them from a linear perspective, as an A goes to B, misses the whole fact of C, D, E, F, the rest of the alphabet, that might be easier to create change in. A quick story, I once had a young boy who was not skipping, he was skipping school, not going to school, and his parents were just all worked up, and his mom was a psychologist, which I should have known that was a suspect to begin with. That was good. There are going to be problems there. They're too smart for their own good. But all it came down to is, I realized this back and forth linear. He doesn't go to school. He doesn't want to. Mom and dad have a fight, ground him. It just turns into this. So I just found the quickest way was to create some crisis in the family. So I had the kid leave the room and tell the parents, here's what we're going to do. Dad, you seem happy-go-lucky. We're going to tell the son that you've been hiding your depression for the last 6 months, and that you're really finally able to talk about how upset you are and how depressed you are. And they full-heartedly agreed to my strange demands. And Kid comes in and we say, look, I know you got all these problems with school, but something come out when I'm talking to your parents. And then dad should have won the Oscar for a great performance as a depressed father. And their whole objective was for the next 2 weeks, the son needed to look after the father because the mom worked really hard. The son needed to take care of the father, make sure the father was okay with all this depression. 2 weeks later, I get a whole different family back. Kids going to school, following the rules, doing all these things. Well, we can say, well, what was really the cause really had no bearing as far as the intervention, because this was already this whole complex process. And all we needed to do was shift a little bit of the context and a little bit of the action within it. So, but I think that's a skill that I wish I saw more people kind of following, because this is, I didn't make this up. I mean, this has been here, like I say, since the 50s, but I think it's easier to teach graduate students that A leads to B, which leads to C. And to say, sometimes you just got to go out and see this big picture and just jump into this live stream of interaction. That's pretty darn scary for a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I love that story because it's interesting. It sounds a little bit, and I'll just tell you my impressions. So the concerning impression was, oh God, you're inventing, the therapist is inventing a depression on the father and so on and so forth. And I can hear people thinking that, but I didn't hear that before you said it. Before you said about the father being depressed, you say he's happy-go-lucky, and they go in these arguments. I was thinking, actually, this father's going through some stuff. So I have a feeling that whether you even sort of consciously, cognitively said, I think this father is going through, and his happy-go-luckiness is a bit of a counterproductive, a counteractive process, that when you said, hey, Dad, you're a bit depressed, that he actually he went, yeah, I can do that, and you would have felt that without it being said. Because perhaps if he had objected to it and said, oh no, I can't do that because I'm completely happy, then he would have said that and you would have gone a different direction. But you actually intuitively picked up something that was a little bit hidden, and it's just your sensitivity. I mean, I just listen to that story and I think, wow, because you didn't think too aggressively and too harshly, you actually picked up that the father was going through some troubles, and then utilized it. And that's that thing that we've been talking about, this utilizing what's there, both obviously in front of you, but also what you're feeling. That felt good for you to say that. What an extraordinary experience.
Yeah. So that means we're not just doing anything. We're not just making anything up, like some subgenres of free jazz, which just sound ugly. Right? But it is informed flexibility and adventurousness. Would I be right, Paul?
Yes, exactly. I remember years ago when Richard was really kind of bringing out the mirror hands work. And I don't know if you remember this, Richard. I came up and I was your demo person, your patient for about 20 minutes at one of the conferences. And you did this one thing that I thought was really, it didn't make, from the outside, it wasn't a big deal. Somebody had needed to blow their nose or something, and he had the tissues. And so Richard took out the tissue, and I think you kind of wiped your nose. And then and I'm sitting across from you in front of all the rest of the participants kind of on the stage thing. And you opened your hand with the used tissue and just said, here? I had no idea what, and I said, no. You're like, sure? And I said, yes. And I don't remember what you did next, but whatever you did after that led us into the whole thing with the hands. Just that act of, you probably don't remember this, but something probably, we're having fun here with my friend here, but it led us into something that I don't think we would have done. And again, it wasn't that big a deal, just a little demo, but to me, it really kind of opened my eyes to, this is really cool. It's not just a guy up here telling people to hold their hands apart and then they're over. There's really again, that term complexity. I remember the first time I saw Ernie do mirror hands, and it looks so darn easy. And I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. But then the complexity of it all, it gets like, oh my gosh, this is even deeper than I thought. So, but I was reminded of that, because that just being silly, offering a used tissue, which you knew I wasn't going to take, who would? But it led to something else. I wish I could remember what it was. Maybe I was in trance. I don't know.
Well, it was interesting because this is what Lou was talking about. This sort of leads with this thought of that what therapists need is to get a felt sense of therapy. So rather than sort of the psychodynamic or psychoanalytical thing where you go to therapy because you're as nuts as your client, but you actually, it's really good for therapists to do some sort of therapy, and things like demonstrations at conferences are a really good way to do it. So you can feel the therapeutic experience. And I think that's something that is elemental in some of the stuff you talk about, that, where magic's everywhere in the room. And you taste it from all kinds, you see it from all different directions if you give yourself the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Paul, can I ask you about client resources and finding client resources? Now, I'm imagining it's not just all sort of guesswork and relying on intuition, that that there's some things that we're doing to really find the theme and the resources where we're going to connect with the client.
Well, I think it just comes down to definitely anytime and this is where the observation piece of being a therapist is, anything that lightens the load for a moment. When I hear something or see something, or as we're talking, intuitively sense something that is a lightening of the client's load for just a moment, I will automatically try to divert attention into that area. So if someone mentions their grandchildren for just a moment, well, I think that's something we need to explore, because if there's a potential resource or something that they can use, strength, and we're not following that, we may be missing out. One of the big things I found is down deep, people have a set of priorities in their life that they love to talk about, even if they're not doing it, even if for some reason they believe they can't do it, society or culturally, they love to think about it. And if you can just find a way to spend more time talking about that than a problem, it's really remarkable how quickly people can heal the less time they are focused on a problem. Because I think it was Paul Wasselvik who said the problem is that people think that they have a problem. And the more they think they have a problem, then they have a problem. And it sounds like kind of a silly, from a logic perspective, but it's very logical, because if everything can be a resource depending on the context it is. So if a client I have who's a divorced mother who's ridden with guilt because she's divorced and thinks she's a terrible mother, and then she comes out and tells you that she snaps at her kids every now and then, you'd say, well, you must really care about those children to be so intense to make sure that they're doing well. So just reframing, and that, that's how we pull out those resources. Now, as far as, magically hearing them, sometimes you just need to jump in and ask things that they're not thinking about. Sometimes interrupt the client with respect. What that scarf you're wearing, that's an interesting color. Now, I haven't seen too many people wear a scarf like that, and the way you're wearing it's very different. Now, that's already shifting things to a different context, a different frame of conversation, and possibly a whole different theme, which could lead to, hypothetically, discussions on fashion, discussions on color, discussions on creativity, discussions on, fill in the blank. But if all we're doing is continuing to be caught within the theme of a problem, well, if it's like a movie, if the movie is a horror movie, you're probably not going to say, that's the most compelling love story I've ever seen, unless you're Hannibal Lecter watching, a horror movie. It's like that scene in The Naked Gun where you see Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley walk out of the movie theater laughing and like they're in love, and the camera goes up and you see they'd walked out of the movie Platoon. And if you remember that one, it's really, really dark, hard, hard to watch movie. And that's the humor in it. But that's the same kind of thing. It's like, as long as we stay trapped in these impoverished, limited themes, then obviously it's harder to access that healing. And that's one thing, as we're talking about the mirroring hands, is that it's adds more fluid to me. And I'm not a licensed mirroring hands practitioner, but I do know one of the founders, and I got a couple of things.
Well connected.
This is such a great point, because I think we can get so focused on the problem, and maybe as therapists we feel that if we're not focusing on the problem, then we're wasting our time, we're wasting the client's time. We need to stick with the problem, and to go off on tangents and talk about other lighter things might be a misappropriation of that time. But actually, no, it's probably a fantastic opportunity to find those resources.
Because the interesting thing is, the client did wear that scarf and did choose to wear that scarf. Now, I can imagine too that might be a very passing thing. Oh, that scarf, oh no, it's nothing particular. But it can be just the metaphoric thing that they did that was an intuitive thing on their part that could be exactly that springboard into all kinds. It's not like you're saying, gee, it would have been good if you wore a red scarf today. And this is exactly your point. You're not intervening or imposing or trying to be the creative instigator. You're being responsive, and that beautiful interplay of I suppose that word authenticity, because this is one of the things, as you say, that trying to be authentic in a process that's got a lot of rigidity to it. That's what you go through, I imagine, in the video program.
Yeah, a lot of that. And, using the example of the scarf too, I think that it requires clinical wisdom, because, let's just do the other side of the equation. I get too smarty pants and think I have a great intervention to ask about the scarf on this young woman. And it turns out she has, borderline personality traits, and then thinks, oh, okay, he cares more for me than I expect, or histrionic, and then it becomes a whole mess there. So it requires that balancing of clinical wisdom, which is wisdom is just based on your experience of mistakes, and I have tons of them. So if I have wisdom, it's I made a lot of mistakes, but balancing also with that intuition, and also good procedure. But you said authenticity, and I think that's really such an important part that Carl Rogers was talking about in the 1950s, and we tend to forget. People will only buy products generally if they have two people they got to buy it from. They'll buy it from the person they like the best. Well, therapy is the same way. If they don't feel you're being authentic and nurturing, to some degree, they're just gonna walk with their feet, or leave, or get mad with you, or whatever, and no healing's gonna happen. Because I think I'm a good therapist. I really do. I think I'm a good therapist, but I'm not good for everyone. And there's some people who could very much benefit from other people. I had one the other day who decided she wanted to go to a colleague of mine for some reason, which I didn't really agree with. But you know what? That's where she needed to go. Because if she perceives as someone else helping her more effectively than me, the only thing that's holding up that is my ego, and thinking, I'm supposed to be Mr. Guru to all who heal everyone. And, be wary, as we all know, of those archetypes. And unfortunately, our field, at least in the past, would get a lot of those kind of, cultish kind of figures.
Yes, it is that our job is to heal everybody, and rather than to be the facilitator. It's a beautiful comment there. I mean, I had one myself where I dealt with a female client for some time. We solved a lot of pragmatic issues, and she said, "Look, I have some kind of girly stuff I want to do. Can I go see who's a female?" And so we sent her off. So there was just that sort of gender thing, and it was great. And she was much resolved. So we're going to put links to this program. I think it's I love the book, but there's just I hope people, having listened to you today, I mean that beautiful drawl of yours, the Southern drawl is so, you're so delightful to listen to.
But Jeff Zeig, first time Jeff Zeig met me, he said, "I love your New York accent."
Not everyone is sensitive. So we'll do links and things to all this. But is there something I know about the course, or just in what we've been saying, which is really sort of a catch-all or a parting message? Because I think people are at the end of their jog now. Their commute, they need to go off.
Well, all I say, and as far as the course, my goal is to kind of do what you guys are doing, is give people a balance of the science, the research, because I try to back up everything I do with some degree of research, because even intuition we're talking about is grounded in some research there, but also try to free people, because I believe we come from a tradition. We are part of a human tradition of healing that has just changed its name over many years because we learn more. The soothsayers, the shamans, the wizards, the magicians, the medicine people, they were doing the best they could with the information they had at that time, and their culture and all of that. And believe it or not, some of them got some pretty amazing results at times. Well, here we are in the 21st century, and we have access to information that's different. We're in a different cultural context, but I don't think we need to forget that we're a part of this healing tradition that all cultures have, the human healing tradition, that if we can embrace our inner healer and realize that the inner healer doesn't have to be in opposition to our inner researcher or our inner scientist, that's all part. Plato was a very deep metaphysical guy, but no one would really accuse him of not being logical and reasonable, So I think there's a way that we can do that, and that's what I hope to purvey in this course. No, I take it back. I didn't hope. I did it. It's actually, I'm really proud of it. I think it's a good course, and I'd be delighted to share it with whoever. And I'm just delighted to have common ideas with people like you who are both grounded in both camps, because I think it makes the field better.
Wonderful. And we love your work, and definitely we'll encourage everyone to check out the new course. Dr. Paul Leslie, thank you so much for joining us here on the Science of Psychotherapy. It's been wonderful talking again.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and I really appreciate it. And I encourage you to continue your magical work, because you're getting a lot of good info out there, and I am grateful as well.
That's beautiful. Well, I can't wait to see you again and give you a proper hug rather than these virtual things. But I miss you, and lovely to see you again. And for now, we'll say bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.